We hear a lot of hype. Change your life in 24 hours or transform everything overnight. But I'm not here for quick fixes. I'm here for something real, something earned. I'm here for brave, imperfect, gritty change. The kind that starts in the quiet moments and shifts your life in 1 week. If you're willing to show up. Let me be clear, this isn't about flipping a switch. It's about lighting a fire. And the truth is, a week is enough to change your life if you commit to these 7 days with intention, honesty, and courage. And I don't mean white-knuckling your way through it. I mean choosing to show up, eyes open, heart open, no armor. Because here's what I know from 2 decades of research. Small, deliberate acts of courage done consistently are far more life-changing than one big dramatic moment. So here's your challenge. 7 days, 7 decisions, 7 tiny revolutions. We spend so much of our lives running from our own stories. We tuck away the chapters that feel too painful, too messy, too complicated. We wear masks. We edit. We downplay. But here's the truth that cracked me open. You cannot change your life until you're willing to look at the whole story, unfiltered, unpolished, and uncensored. The beginning of transformation is not about chasing a better version of yourself. It's about fully embracing the one that already exists. The one that's been bruised and beautiful, fractured and full of fire. That's where it starts. That's where it has to start. We have this idea that if we bury our shame deep enough, it loses its power. But the opposite is true. Shame thrives in secrecy. It feeds off silence. The longer we avoid our story, the more control it has over us. The moment you speak it out loud, even if just to yourself, you begin to loosen its grip. You begin to reclaim your power. That's not just psychological, it's physiological. When we acknowledge our pain, our nervous system's calm. When we tell the truth, even if our voice shakes, our body responds with relief. You don't have to share it with the world, but you do have to stop hiding it from yourself. Owning your story doesn't mean you're proud of every page. It means you stop pretending those pages don't exist. It means you stop defining yourself by your worst moments. But you also don't pretend those moments didn't shape you. You can hold both. You can hold regret and self-respect. You can hold grief and gratitude. That's what it means to be a wholehearted human. You are not a highlight reel. You are a collection of moments. Some wild, some tender, some terrifying, all worthy of being known. When you begin to own your story, what you're really doing is ending the war within yourself. So many of us are at constant battle with who we were, what we've done, or what we've been through. We compartmentalize. That was the old me, we say. But growth isn't about disowning the old you. It's about integrating her. Every version of you fought for the one you are right now. You don't have to keep reliving the past, but you do have to stop abandoning the person you were in it. That version of you, she deserves compassion, not contempt. There's this subtle but powerful shift that happens when you move from avoidance to acceptance. When you say, this happened, I was there, I felt it, I survived it. That shift is where healing begins. Because once you stop trying to outrun your story, you can actually begin to write the next chapter with intention. When you're no longer defined by what hurt you, you're free to be led by what matters to you. Your values, your vision, your voice. That's real freedom. That's where possibility opens up. And let me be honest with you, this kind of ownership is not easy. It's not Instagram pretty. It's not tied up with a bow. It's work, deep emotional labor, but it's also sacred. It's the work of becoming, of coming home to yourself. You will be tempted to minimize your pain, to compare your trauma, to say, it wasn't that bad. But your story doesn't need to be dramatic to be deserving of your attention. If it left a mark, it matters. If you're still carrying it, it matters. If it still whispers to you at 2 a.m., it matters, and it deserves to be seen. When you own your story, you stop waiting for someone else to rescue you. You realize you were never broken, just disconnected from your wholeness. You stop looking for permission to move forward. You stop needing validation to begin again. You become the author. You pick up the pen, and even if your hand is shaking, you write anyway. Every single day, we're given hundreds of small choices, tiny forks in the road. And most of them come down to this: do I choose courage or do I choose comfort? It's rarely loud. It's not a dramatic scene in a movie. It's subtle. It's the decision to speak up when it would be easier to stay quiet, to tell the truth when a lie would protect your image, to set a boundary when keeping the peace feels safer. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's a whisper that says, I'll do the hard thing anyway. Let me be clear, comfort is not the enemy. We need comfort. We're wired to seek safety. That's biology. But when comfort becomes our default, when it becomes the thing we reach for to avoid discomfort, conflict, or vulnerability, we end up shrinking. We start living small, controlled lives. And what I've learned through my research and through my own damn hard personal experiences is this: you cannot simultaneously live a brave life and avoid discomfort. It's one or the other. You have to choose. Courage is not natural. It's learned. It's a skill, a muscle. And the only way to strengthen that muscle is to use it, especially when it's inconvenient, when it's awkward, when your voice shakes and your hands sweat. We like the idea of being brave until it costs us something: approval, ease, perfection, even relationships. But that's the price. And the payoff? The payoff is self-respect, integrity, the kind of quiet, unshakable confidence that comes from knowing you told the truth even when it scared you. We've been taught to believe that playing it safe is smart, that being agreeable is polite, that staying quiet keeps the peace. But the reality is, comfort without courage costs us more than we realize. It costs us our authenticity, our joy, our connection to our own truth. And over time, that cost compounds. You look around one day and realize you've been living someone else's version of your life. And it didn't happen all at once. It happened in the tiny moments where you chose to stay silent instead of being seen. Choosing courage doesn't always mean confrontation. Sometimes it means walking away from something that's no longer aligned. Sometimes it's standing in your values when the world around you is telling you to compromise. Sometimes it's allowing yourself to be seen, flaws and all, when your instinct is to hide. Vulnerability and courage are not separate. They are the same damn thing. And if you're not willing to be vulnerable, you're not willing to be brave. That's not just a feel-good quote, it's fact. People often ask me, but what if I fail? What if I try and it goes terribly wrong? And I say, then you tried. Then you were brave, and you learned, and you grew. That's the gift of courage. It doesn't promise a perfect outcome, but it guarantees growth. You are never left unchanged by a courageous act. Even if it blows up in your face, you walk away with more clarity, more strength, more truth in your bones, and that is always worth it. Look, I'm not asking you to bulldoze through life on fire for justice every single moment. I'm asking you to pay attention to the invitations, those subtle gut checks where you feel the pull to be a little bolder, a little braver, to raise your hand, to say no, to say yes, to say this matters to me. And in those moments when the comfort of staying the same feels strong, remember this: your life expands or contracts based on your willingness to be brave. That's the truth. That's the work. That's the invitation. There's a myth we've been sold, especially those of us raised to be caretakers, peacemakers, or the nice one, that being kind means always being available, that love means self-sacrifice, that strength means saying yes, even when your body, your heart, and your calendar are screaming no. But here's what I've learned over and over again, often the hard way. You cannot live a brave life without boundaries, and you cannot pour from a cup that's bone dry. Boundaries are not walls. They're the distance at which I can love you and love myself simultaneously. They are not about shutting people out. They're about choosing what gets in. They are an act of clarity, not cruelty. And when we set them clearly, consistently, and without apology, we stop betraying ourselves to please others. That is radical. That is powerful. That is necessary. Because the cost of boundarylessness isn't just burnout. It's resentment, self-abandonment, and quiet, constant exhaustion. A boundary isn't just a spoken rule. It's an energetic contract with yourself. It's a commitment to say, I will no longer sacrifice my peace to keep other people comfortable. And that might mean disappointing someone. It might mean being misunderstood. It might even mean losing a relationship you've outgrown. But the alternative? Living in a state of quiet, chronic depletion, where your yes means nothing because you never allow yourself a no. That's not love. That's martyrdom dressed as kindness. And let me be honest, for many of us, setting boundaries is terrifying at first, especially if we've been conditioned to people please, to perform, or to keep everything smooth and tidy. The first time you say, I'm not available for that, or I can't hold space for this right now, your whole nervous system might panic. You'll feel guilt, you'll feel shame, you'll worry they'll leave, you'll worry they'll think you're selfish. That's normal. That's your old programming trying to protect you. But if you can breathe through that discomfort, if you can hold your ground, the empowerment on the other side is like oxygen. Here's what boundary setting really is. It's choosing truth over harmony. It's being honest about what you can hold, what you need, and where your line is, even if it rocks the boat. And yes, it will rock the boat sometimes, especially if you've spent years being the one who never said no. People will notice the shift, and not everyone will applaud it, but the right people, the people who love the real you, will adjust. They will honor the space you claim, and the ones who can't, that's data. When you start honoring your own energy, you start to notice where it's leaking. You notice who drains you, what patterns leave you depleted, which roles you've taken on that were never really yours to begin with. That awareness is gold, because now, instead of reacting from burnout, you can respond from alignment. You can make decisions that are rooted in your values, not your fear. You can give from your overflow, not your survival mode. And that shift, that's what sustainable giving looks like. That's what sustainable living looks like. You were not put on this earth to be everything to everyone. You were not born to be agreeable at the expense of your truth. You are allowed to take up space, to rest, to say no, to choose what serves you. That's not selfish. That's sacred. And when you honor your boundaries, you're not just protecting your energy, You're modeling what self-respect looks like. You're showing others that your needs matter, that your peace is non-negotiable, and that love, real love, always includes space for your wholeness. We live in a world that glorifies speed, hustle, reactivity. We're constantly asked to move faster, answer quicker, stay ahead. But the truth is, transformation doesn't happen in the rush. It happens in the pause. The pause is where awareness lives. It's where we reclaim our power from the default settings we've been living in. And it's where we get to choose consciously, courageously, how we want to show up instead of how we've always shown up. The pause is that sacred moment between stimulus and response. It's the breath you take before you hit send on the angry text. It's the space between someone's words and your reaction. And it's often the most powerful and most uncomfortable place to be. Why? Because the pause invites us to feel instead of flee, to reflect instead of react, to respond with intention instead of impulse. And that takes practice, not perfection, not performance, practice, repeated, mindful effort. Let me tell you, for many of us, especially those who've experienced trauma, chaos, or constantly having to be on, the pause can feel terrifying. Stillness can feel like danger. Silence can feel like rejection. Our nervous system is wired to interpret calm as suspicious if we've lived our lives bracing for the next blow. But here's the truth. Stillness is not the enemy. Disconnection is. And when we pause, we begin the slow, gentle work of reconnecting to our breath, to our bodies, to our actual lives. In the pause, we get curious. What am I actually feeling right now? What's mine and what's someone else's projection? Am I triggered or am I grounded? Those are powerful questions, but we can't even access them if we're moving too fast to feel. And here's where it gets real. Most of us avoid the pause because we're afraid of what we'll find there. Sadness, anger, loneliness, grief. But avoiding those feelings doesn't make them disappear. It just buries them. And buried emotions don't die. They leak out in sarcasm, in stress, in self-sabotage. Practicing the pause is not about being passive. It's about being present. And presence is the bravest thing you can offer to yourself, to your relationships, to the world. Because when you slow down, even for a few breaths, you create space for authenticity, for regulation, for real connection. You stop living from reaction and start living from response. And that's where integrity begins. Not in the rush of proving or performing, but in the quiet of choosing. Now, let's be clear. Practicing the pause doesn't mean avoiding hard conversations or ignoring conflict or pretending everything's okay. It means responding with clarity and groundedness, not heat and panic. It means saying, let me take a moment to gather my thoughts instead of blurting out something you'll regret. It means recognizing when you're triggered and choosing to return to yourself before you react from fear or old stories. And it means respecting your nervous system enough to give it space to regulate. You don't need a meditation cushion or a silent retreat to pause. You need presence. You need willingness. You need a moment to check in before you check out, whether it's one breath before responding to your child, 5 minutes before replying to that email, or an evening walk instead of an impulsive confrontation. That pause is your power. That's where the shift happens. That's where you break cycles. That's where healing begins, not with a bang, but with a breath. Every one of us walks through life with a narrator in our head, And that narrator is not always kind. It tells us stories about who we are, what we deserve, what we're capable of. And a lot of the time, those stories aren't based on truth. They're based on fear, on wounds, on old programming. But here's the thing. Just because your inner voice says something doesn't make it true. You have the right and the power to question it, to rewrite it, to stop letting an outdated narrative determine your current reality. That voice in your head, it was shaped a long time ago by caregivers, teachers, culture, trauma, comparison. Maybe you were told you were too much or not enough. Maybe you learned that love had to be earned, that failure was fatal, that belonging came with conditions. Those stories, especially the ones you never consciously chose, have a sneaky way of becoming internal scripts that say, you'll never change. You always screw things up. You're not worthy of rest. And if you're not aware, those scripts run the show. Awareness is the first step. Start noticing the moments when your inner voice turns harsh, cold, or critical. Pay attention to the always and never statements. Those are red flags. You always mess this up. You never get it right. That's not your intuition. That's your shame talking. And shame is a liar. A loud one, a convincing one, but still a liar. When we shine light on our inner dialogue, we can start to dismantle what doesn't serve us, and we can begin to speak to ourselves the way we would to someone we love. Now, I know this isn't about just thinking positive or saying affirmations in the mirror until you believe them. This is deeper work. This is about challenging the root of those beliefs. Asking, where did I learn this story? Who gave it to me? And do I still want to carry it? Because most of the time, we're dragging around narratives that aren't even ours. Inherited pain, unexamined bias, internalized scarcity. And we're letting those old stories run the most precious parts of our lives. Our self-worth, our relationships, our dreams. Rewriting the inner narrative means choosing a new lens, one rooted in compassion, one that says, yes, I've made mistakes and I'm still worthy, one that recognizes growth instead of demanding perfection. It means replacing I'm a failure with I'm learning, replacing I'm broken with I'm healing, replacing I don't matter with my voice deserves space. And let me tell you, this isn't fake. It's not fluff. It's reprogramming your brain. It's choosing to tell yourself the truth instead of rehearsing and it's not a one-time thing. Rewriting your inner narrative is daily, gritty, deliberate work. It's catching yourself in a shame spiral and choosing a different path. It's refusing to bully yourself into growth. It's choosing to befriend your inner world, even the parts that feel messy or hard to love. When you do this, your nervous system shifts. Your relationships change. Your confidence doesn't come from pretending you're perfect. It comes from knowing you're real and worthy as you are. The stories you tell yourself become the life you live. So choose stories that hold space for your humanity, stories that honor your resilience, stories that allow you to begin again. Because the old narrative might say, you're stuck, but the truth, you're evolving. The old voice might say, you're too far gone, but the truth, you're here. You're reading this, you're still reaching, still becoming. And that means the story isn't over, not even close. You get to keep writing it. Here's the truth. We don't grow by getting it all right. We grow by showing up, messy, unprepared, afraid, unsure, and taking imperfect action over and over again. If you're waiting to feel 100% ready before you begin the thing, say the words, chase the dream, set the boundary, you'll be waiting forever. Because readiness is a myth, certainty is an illusion, and the most powerful moves you'll ever make will be the ones you made while trembling. We've been taught that failure is the enemy, that mistakes are something to hide, cover, or apologize for. But the research and the lived experience of just about every brave person I've ever interviewed tells a different story. The people who change their lives, who expand into purpose, who come alive, are not the ones who did it perfectly. They're the ones who did it anyway, who dared to start the podcast before their voice felt polished, who applied for the job before they felt qualified, who launched the idea before the branding was perfect. That's not recklessness. That's courage. And let's be honest, perfectionism masquerades as ambition, but it's actually fear in high heels. It's not a drive to do well. It's a desperate need to avoid shame, to avoid judgment, to avoid vulnerability. And the problem with perfectionism is this: it's paralyzing. It convinces us we have to wait until everything's flawless before we're allowed to begin. But guess what? The path to excellence is paved with imperfect attempts. There is no shortcut. There is no bypass. You have to be willing to be bad at something long enough to get good at it. Imperfect action builds momentum, and momentum builds confidence. Not the kind of confidence that comes from having it all figured out, but the kind that comes from trusting yourself to try again. When you start showing up without waiting for permission or perfection, something shifts. You stop making fear your compass. You stop asking, what if I fail? And start asking, what if I grow? You stop needing to be impressive and start allowing yourself to be real. And that's where magic begins. When we embrace imperfect action, we also give others permission to do the same. We stop modeling burnout as worthiness. We stop pretending we've got it all together. We normalize showing up with our whole, messy, work-in-progress selves. And the impact of that in our families, our workplaces, our communities is huge. Because people don't need you to be perfect. They need to see what's possible when you're brave. They need to see what it looks like to fail and get back up, to course correct, to keep going. Here's what I know for sure. Some of the most meaningful transformational work I've done in my own life, professionally and personally, began as an uncertain, imperfect first step. I didn't know how it would land. I didn't have all the answers, but I had a deep gut level knowing that not acting would cost me more than failing ever could. That's the pivot point, when your desire to grow becomes louder than your fear of falling. That's when imperfect action becomes not just brave, but necessary. So let this be your invitation, not to rush, not to push, not to strive for flawless execution, but to begin, to choose movement over mastery, to choose progress over performance. Start the thing, write the words, make the call, try the new way, be clumsy, be real, be seen, because the goal is not to be perfect, the goal is to be in motion. That's where your life starts changing, not in the waiting, but in the doing. You don't need a year. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need to fix every part of your life overnight. You just need 1 week of radical honesty, 1 week of courageous steps, 1 week of showing up not as the version of you that's polished and performing, but the version of you that's ready to be real. Because the truth is, change doesn't wait for you to feel ready. Change begins the moment you choose to do one brave thing, and then another, and then another. It begins when you decide to stop abandoning yourself, when you rewrite the stories that have held you small, when you honor your energy, when you pause, when you say no, even when your voice shakes, when you say yes to yourself, even when your knees do too. That's the kind of shift that doesn't just change your week, it changes your life. So go on, be messy, be uncertain, be beautifully unfinished, but be in motion, one moment of bravery at a time. The next 7 days, they don't need to be perfect. They just need to be yours.